Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumos, Perek Dalet, Halacha Dalet, Halacha Hey, and Halacha Vav. We are going to be learning Daf Lamed Tes. We left off already in middle of the Amid by the two dots, by the brackets, 6 lines from the top of the Amid. The Gemara now is going to give us the sources for Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva. The Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, we already learned in the Mishnah. The sheet of Rabbi Eliezer that if a person wants to be marbe in truma, he can give only up until 10%, and that's because trumas meiser is also referred to as truma, and trumas meiser is 10%. I know it's 10% from the 10%, but you see that the quantity of 1 of 10 is referred to in the Torah as a truma. But what about Rabbi Yishmael? Rabbi Yishmael says that if you want to be marbe, you can give up until half, right? Mechza chulin and mechza truma. Not more, but you can give up until half. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva say, no, you can give almost everything. What is needed is at sheyishor sham chulin. You have to leave back for yourself chulin. Bekitzer, the Gemara is going to give us sources for both of these opinions, and we're going to go right away from there into halacha hey. Halacha hey is a very technical Mishnah. The Mishnah is going to point out that when you give meiser, not truma, whether you're giving meiser, whether you're giving trumas meiser, in other words, you're giving exactly 10%, that if the size of fruits generally change throughout the season. As a rule, the earlier in the season, the more firm they are, the more plump they are. So let's say you have a basket. A basket will contain from this product, let's say 100. That's only in the beginning of the season. But as you go into the season, when the fruits or the vegetables begin to soften and they begin to shrivel, we know by us the shriveling, so they get smaller. So mitamol, the same basket can contain 110. The same basket at the end of the season, when they're completely shriveled up, can contain 150. In other words, if a person is going to be using the number as the way of measuring the 10%, they have to be mindful that I can't just say, I'm taking out 10 from the basket. Lavdafke. Yeah, in the beginning of the season, the baskets contain 100, 10 will be exactly 10%. Later on in the season, maybe at the end of the season, just giving numbers, maybe the basket then contains 150. 10% is going to be 15. The bottom, that's going to be interesting. The Mishnah is going to go into that technical part, but from it, we're going to see that when it comes to separating maisres, dafke in precision, the lowest level of precision is counting the product. And the emes is, like we already spoke this out in prior Masechtas, because every product, every fruit, every apple is not exactly the same size or the same weight, not volume nor weight of the other. But counting is an acceptable means, as we'll get into more details. Better than counting is measuring volume, and better than measuring volume is going to be weighing. You know, the most precise way of separating maisres is by weighing. And we're going to speak it out again when we learn the Mishnah, even though it's not written in the Mishnah. It's definitely lachatchil acceptable to separate maisres with any given product the way that product is commercialized, the way that people interact with that product. In other words, if the norm is to count, there's nothing wrong with counting, giving 10% from the count, even though it's not as precise as the measure of volume, certainly not as precise as the weighing. Now we're going to also get from our Mishnah, we're going to review the Shita of Abba Elazar ben Goimel, who holds, this is important, that Trumas Meiser is allowed to be given ba'oimet. Truma Meiser vadainat al tarbala aseru mados. Everyone else other than Abba Elazar holds that Trumas Meiser, like Meiser, may not be given by estimation. He disagrees with that. He holds it may be given by estimation. That nuance will be important to better understand the Mishnah. Halacha Vav, the final Mishnah we're going to learn today, is going to bring a 3-way machlokes tanoim when it comes to how much ratio do you need of chulin to be mevatel truma. And yes, just a chazer, that be'emes we're going with the shita that truma is batel beroiv. Like everything else, that's batel beroiv. Normally, midrabanan, you have to have a larger ratio. Normally, let's say the ratio has to be echad b'shishin. By truma, the ratio has to be 1 in 100. That's the general correct statement. And 1 in 100 dafka means 100 chulin and 1 truma. not 99 one. In other words, you have to have 100 of one more than the other. Chulin more than the truma. That's the general opinion. In that, there's another two opinions, as we'll see. As we'll see when we learn the Mishnah. It's fascinating. Okay, Chavra Daf Lamed Tes. Again, in middle, it's almost the middle of the Amid by the brackets, 6 lines from the top. Rabbi Yishmael holds that if a person wants to be marbe in truma, they have the option of gifting up to half. As long as they keep half for themselves, mechza chulin, they can give the mechza truma. My Talmud Rabbi Yishmael. So he quotes a pasuk in Parsha Shoiftim. Look inside the Torah Oira Sholem. It says, Reishis di goncha tiroishcha v'yitzarecha, the Reishis geis soincha titanloi. Now the Torah could have written, that's the way the Rashirilio says, the Torah could have written, di goncha tiroishcha v'yitzarecha, reishisam titanloi. The fact that the Torah writes Reishis di goncha, we juxtapose the word Reishis. Reishis is what you're gifting, the beginning of what you're gifting. The goncha is what you are retaining. The Torah puts these words together to say that there has to be equal. Now, of course, not that you have to give the truma, not that you have to give to the coin an equal amount of truma. No, if you want to be marbe, you have to make sure that the reishis, which is a gift, and the goncha are the same. Right inside. My time with Rabbi Yishmael. The Torah juxtaposes the words reishis to the goncha to tell you that dayoy l'reishis sheyeh kedagan, but not that the reishis should be more than the dagan. The dagan is in reference to that which you retain for yourself. I know that dayoy means enough, meaning in this context, that's the enough. That's it. More than that, you can't. And as we learned yesterday, which is important, according to Beis Hillel, if you give more, the whole thing collapses. Okay. Now, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva Oimrim, and the words of these two Tanoim are Ache Yishayir Sham Chulen. So here we go. Minayin Shaloi Asa Klum Ache Yishayir Mixas. Where do they get their opinion? All that's needed is for you to leave something for yourself. Talmud Loimer. And now we're going again completely to another topic, even though there's a machlokes here in the commentators as to what pasuk are we bringing. We're going to go with the girsa that we have inside the Gemara. And this is quoting a pasuk that we have in Shalach. V'negeya Chala. Chala Truma, yeah, the Torah calls Chala in the parsha of Chala Truma. Aside of the fact that we know that halachically the kedusha of the Chala is like Truma, the kedusha of Bikurim is like Truma, but Chala is also referred to in the pasuk as Truma. What's the lashon hapasuk by Chala? It says Mei Reishis Arisoy Seichem. Mei reishis arisay secha means from your dough you give a gift. From your dough is the way Hashem is writing, not all your dough. You have to keep by challah something for yourself. Mei reishis v'loy kol reishis. So just like we find by challah, that the gift of challah, even though there also we know that midrabanan, what are the correct shiurim? Echad michav dalid, right? If you are a baker, 1 of 48, but that's the required amount. But if you want to give more than the required amount, gesundheit, but you can't give it all. You have to keep something for yourself. So the concept of keeping something from yourself that we find by challah, which is called truma, is learned according to Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva to all truma. You give truma gesundheit, you have to leave something for yourself. Now, there is a fantastic discussion concerning what that something is. What's something that you have to leave for yourself? A grain, achita achas by truma. And there are many that want to say that what you have to leave for yourself is a kazayis. And by the way, that discussion is also by challah. Where do they get the kazayis? So it's just to have these ideas. What's more known, as it should be, is the machlokes we have between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yechanan and Eish concerning chatzi shir by Yisurim. Vadai, that by many Yisurim, you are only punished not by all, not by avodah zarah, but by almost all prohibitions, there is a minimum amount. Less than that, you won't be penalized. Right? Shabbos, carrying, most things, food, groigeres. If you carry less than a groigeres, you're not going to be chayiv chatos. All right? Eating non-kosher, God forbid. What's eating? Eating is a kazayis. And the question is, what about if someone were to eat less than that amount? Chatzi shir. Chatzi shir doesn't have to mean half, right, Aviv? Less. So there's a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Eish Lakish whether you're violating a biblical prohibition. You're not going to get punished. The Eish Lakish says no. The fact that you are only punished in those cases where you have a minimum amount of prohibition, that means if you have less, biblically, you didn't violate anything. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Chatzi shir is asur min haTorah. You're not going to get punished. It's also min haTorah. And the Gemara gives two reasons. One is a pasuk. It says koil chelev. That chelev is the prohibited chelev. Any amount of chelev is asur. And then you have the logic that we have right in Chulin, chazei le'etztarufe, which means that if half of a shir is b'chlal not a prohibition, right? 0 plus 0 equals 0. Must be no that a half a shir is a problem. It's not a problem enough for you to get punished, but it's already a problem. So when you add a problem with another problem, it becomes a bigger problem. Then you get penalized. That's the logic of a Rabbi Yochanan, and then you have the whole topic, whether it's a siman, whether it's a siba. Is it because you actually might have the other half? If a person has chatzi shir, I think by Yom Kippur, right, the isur is koiseva sagasa, whatever the limit there is. Then you're not the being ma'ana yourself. If I had part of that, but I had it the last second of Yom Kippur, where there isn't enough time in Yom Kippur for me to have the other half because there's no more Yom Kippur. Are you also in violation? In other words, is chazi li'itztarufe just a simin, or is it a siba? Since you might have the other half, and if you have the other half, then you're going to get penalized. So God doesn't even want you to have the first half. So you have that topic. But the topic that I want to speak about is, do we say chatzi shir by a mitzvah? Let's go with Rabbi Yochanan. Chatzi shir is also min haTorah. I'll give you a mashal. A person on Pesach, for whatever reason, he's in Sibir. Our Zaydas were over there in Sibir because they were frum, and they only had a half a kazayas. Are they biblically obligated to eat a half a kazayas of matzah? We know that to fulfill the mitzvah of eating, you have to have a kazayas. They don't have a kazayas. Is eating a half a kazayas of significance? In other words, do we say the logic of Rabbi Yochanan in the prohibition, chatzi shir is asur, so chatzi shir is chayiv? Do we say that? Why am I mentioning all that? Because this topic is related to our topic in halacha, by chala and by truma. The words that we have of Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva is achi yishoir sham chulin. What does that mean? Doesn't mean that you have to leave back for yourself a kazayas. You have to have chulin. You have to have something for you to eat. What's eating a kazayas? Right? The truma is being matir. Being matir what? The challah is being matir. There has to be something it's being matir. If maybe if it's less than a kazayas, it's not called you being matir anything. Or you can say the concept of chatzi shir. No, achi yishar sham chulin may mean even a mashuhum, a drop, a kernel, a granule. Why? I don't care that it's not called eating because it's something. No, it's the concept. The topic of chatzi shir is brought in the achronim vis-a-vis chala of how much you have to leave behind. The reishis made reishis v'loy kol reishis, and therefore subsequently, now that we are comparing truma to chala, the same will be over here. It's not interesting. Okay.
So if you left, if you have to leave a kazayas, but you left less, then you've done nothing.
Very good. Notes. If you have to leave a kazayas and you didn't leave a kazayas, then your separation was lechatchila, not a separation. Very good. Because the act.
So how do we say that even a kernel is okay? Because it's not masakin anything. It's not. What are we doing?
What was that?
How can you say that leaving something, even a kernel, is okay? Because the minimum
That's what we're
amount.
Saying. Some people say it won't be okay. On the other hand, midoiraisa, giving a kernel is okay, because it doesn't say you have to give them something that's substantial. Fakert, give them anything.
Right, but then you're not attacking anything.
If you leave less than a kazayis, many people argue that. Many people argue you are, because chatzi shir is asur min haTorah. Chatzi shir is also something when it comes to a mitzvah. Notice who said that less? Who says that a kernel is nothing? Even though you have a shir of a kazayis, if the concept of a chatzi shir is chashuv, when it comes to, if we can take that from Isur to Heter and to Mitzvah, then here we can tolerate even less than a Kazayas. Okay, let's go weiter. Let's move on weiter. So says the Mishnah, like we mentioned in the words of introduction, we're not talking about Truma. Dafka, not about Truma. Now we are moving on to Meiser, or also to Trumas Meiser, as we'll see, like we already mentioned, the sheet of Abba Lozer. B'shloisha Perakim, there are 3 times throughout the season, Misharim Esakal Kola, that you have to be mindful. You have to actually estimate. You have to be aware of what fits in the basket, meaning we're speaking about someone who's separating Meiser by number, and we don't have to count every single basket, how many apples you have in the basket. If the apples of my orchard fill up my 100 in a basket, if that's how it works, so then I don't know if you have to do it once or twice or 3 times. But once you establish that shiur, I can go ahead and say from every basket I'm taking off 10 because there's 100. Good, but not good, because throughout the season the size of the fruits change. Like us, the older you get, the more you shrivel. Aviv, don't be scared. You're so far away from you, you're going in the opposite direction. You see, that's the difference over here. You're getting bigger, we're getting smaller. Halavai, we're getting smaller. Okay, Bibi Koides. So earlier in the season, it's plump and firm. So everything takes up more size. The siyafos at the end of the season, everything is in ganzen legamri shriveled up. The emsa kayis, it begins to shrivel. People like me think they're just beginning to shrivel. I don't know what the people around me think. It's fine, tzachon. So, like we said, numbers. So, if in the beginning of the season a basket, 100 fills up the basket, maybe at the end of the season 150, whatever the number, 120. Middle of the season 110. In other words, you're giving by number, fine. Don't fix the number throughout the whole season, because the size of the product itself changes normally from bigger to smaller. Now, Daf Lamed Tes Amud Bey, Zok the Mishnah, V'hamoinem Meshubach. Counting, in other words, we are speaking about someone who's giving Meiser by count. That's why because guys, if you're giving it by weight, who cares? There's no need to mention about the fruit shrivel or they don't shrivel. The weight is the weight. It weighs 100 pounds. I give 10 pounds to the Levi. So we're speaking about someone who's giving it through minyan. And so says the Mishnah that giving Meiser through count is better. It's meshubach. It's better than what? That's the bikasha. L'chu'ura, from all measurements, as we're seeing, counting the number is the least accurate. It's okay to give it, but it's the least accurate. But l'chu'ura, if you're not even counting, then you're already going by estimation. Estimation is asur. The words meshubach imply that there is another option. There is another halachically valid option that's not even counting. And for that we say that counting is meshubach from that. The Gemara is going to address what is the that for which we say the moina is meshubach. Because moina compared to the measuring of volume, counting is not as accurate as measuring volume. Measuring volume is not as accurate as measuring weight. The most accurate is weight. Because the same volume, we all know that, can have different weight. Let's go inside. And that's the Seder of the Mishnah. So Vahamoina is already Meshubach. From what the Gemara is going to say. Vahamoideid, we're speaking about measuring volume, is already Meshubach, Heimenu, that's even better. It's more accurate than minyan, than Moina. And Vahashoikel, weighing, in other words, you take a measurement of weight, that's Meshubach Mishlashtan. That is the most praiseworthy, all based on the premise that Meiser has to be given with accuracy. So the more accurate, the more praiseworthy. Lest you should not think, that if a person asks you, how should you separate Meisers? You say, I learned the Mishnah. The Mishnah says shoikel, weight, which almost a person can think that minyan is a b'di'evid. It's not true. Minyan is already a lachatchila. Minyan is already a lachatchila. So why would someone, like, why would we say that? Like normally we say, do it the most accurate. No, we don't say that. What we do say is the way it's common for people in that society at that time to divide product or to sell product. That will be the way that we use. That's very important. I know today in most markets over here that I know, because weights are so inexpensive, everything is weight. You have these bags. Not everything. Most things are weight. Could be there's certain things they write on the supermarket. It's by unit. In other words, if the way I say it, if it's commercialized by unit, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you giving 10% from units, even though we know it's not the most accurate. This is the norm. If you want to go beyond that, you're fine, but it's not like b'di'evid, I gave it b'minyan. If something is commercialized or if something is divided, something is exchanged through measuring size, then you do it by size. And if it's done by weight, you do it by weight. And that makes a lot of sense. When people hear this, when I heard this, it says, oh, it makes sense. I get it. Don't give things by estimation. But what is precise? Ain't no davar soif by precise. You can go out of your mind with precise. You do it the normal way. Okay. The problem is, coming back, the Mishnah says, Hamoina meshubach. I would think Moina, minyan, is the baseline. Why do you mean meshubach? What other method is there for us to say that minyan is shayin meshubach? Amar Rab Chuna, I'll tell you, the only method that we have that's not as accurate as counting is approximation. Problem is, we're speaking about meiser. Has to be accurate. That's the Gemara. So it must be that our Mishnah, whoever used the words meshubach, was speaking only about trumas meiser, not meiser, trumas meiser, and you have one Tana, Abba Elazar ben Goimel, who holds that trumas meiser could be given ba'omet. It's amazing. So when they formulated the Mishnah, we don't paskin like him, but they were maramas already. We took his opinion into account. You do counting, but it's a meshubach from the one opinion that holds that you can get away with a mu'umet. Amar Rab Chuna, right? That meshubach min ha'toyre min ha'oimed. Look inside the Pnei Moshe 7 lines from the top. In ha'toyre min ha'oimed, uka'abe Elazar ben Goimel. The Sfira Leila El, we had this on our pagination. Daf Lamed Beis, the Trumas Meiser, Nitelas ba'oimed. It could be given ba'oimed. It can also be given b'machshava. Okay. Says the Gemara. In other words, it's all connected. Something that you have to give with exactitude, you have to count. If you don't have to give it with exactitude, then we go back to the way people give truma. When people give truma, they don't even have to have a mara makoim. It's not even exact. I'm going to give it in the northern part. I'm going to give it from the northern part. Showing good. There's a lot of approximations by truma. Now, Omar Rab Chanina Berei Rab Hillel, you know what? I'll prove that this is a good statement from our Mishnah itself, not only from the words meshubach. Masnisa Amra came that really there are 4 options: mu'umed, mida, medida, and mishkol. How do I know that? Because since the Mishnah at the end, when it gave you the most accurate way of measuring, which is weighing product, v'hashoikel mishubach, from the 3. If there are only 3 options, if our Tana would go like the majority opinion, you have to do it by exact. The question is how? So if there's only 3, so normally you would say that the 3rd option is better than the other 2. Not that the 3rd option is better from the other 3. There aren't any other 3. The Mishnah spoke about shoikel, moidid, and moina. So the fact that the Mishnah writes v'hashoikel mishubach mishloshtan, does that already not imply that aside of weighing, there are other 3 options: oimid, minyan, and medida? So the Gemara says that's not a raya. Amar Rabbi Chinana, this is not Berei Rab Hillel l'chayra. Amar Rabbi Chinana, no. That's the way people speak. When you have 3 options and one is the best of the 3, meaning it's better than the other 2, but it's the best of the 3. You can use this expression of mishubach mishloshtan, tiftar bishloshtan, mishloshtan bishloshtan. Mishloshtan literally means that there are 4 options, and 3 is better from its shoulders and above from the other 3. But sometimes, even though we use a mem, we mean a base. From the 3, this is the best of the 3. So you have to know how to speak. Tiftar b'shloshtan, and therefore v'leis at shama mina klum. From this, you can't prove anything. But we're not rejecting the fact that the lashon of the hamoina meshubach implies that we're taking into account another option, for which Rabbi has to say, oh, counting is showing good. You're already on the right path. Okay. So it's amazing that we're giving some chashivos to Abba Elazar. And now we'll begin, Chavra, with the dinam of Bittul. And it's fascinating. So let's go. Halacha of today's final Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer. And this is something that we always quoted. That Truma Oila Be'echad Umeya, even though Midoi Raisa, to be Mavatel one in another. Isur Beheter. I know that Truma is not Asur, but in our context it is Asur. Because Truma is Asur to a non-Kohen. I don't want to have in my chulin. I'm not allowed to have in my chulin truma. But if truma got mixed in my chulin, even though midah eraisa, it's batal beroiv. Nevertheless, midrabanan, this is important. There has to be a much greater ratio. And even though the other ratios that we find elsewhere, the most common one will be 1 in 60, not so by truma, that you have to have echad umeya. Again, not echad bimeya, echad umeya. If you have 99 chulin, and in the 99 falls 1 truma, 1 in 99, it will not be batal. This is what we call meduma. Meduma means we don't know what it is. Meduma means there's a mixture. And the consequences, as we keep on learning, is that a non-kohen will never be allowed to eat any of these 100. No, the owner doesn't have to gift the 100 to a kohen. No, there's only 1 of truma in it. He has to gift 1, and the kohen will have to pay for the other 99. But since food that can only be eaten by kohanim have a lower retail price, so there's a huge loss. He doesn't have to gift it all. He can sell 99, so he's getting 100. 1 is truma, but it's going to be a discounted price, and only kohanim can eat it. Meduma. For you to be mavatal it, what does bittul mean? That I, the owner, can eat from it. You have to have the ratio of 100 against 1. And by the way, even when you had bittul, we don't want for the owner to gain the truma. So let's say if I have a basket of 100 apples, in it falls in another 1 apple of truma. Even though it's echad umeya, it's batal, nevertheless, I should take 1 apple and give it to a kohen. I'm not saying that the one that I gave to the kohen is pung that one, but I don't want to gain. In other words, there's a financial issue here. The isur of truma for me is batal because it was batal in echad umeya. But at the end of the day, I only own 100. How do I own 101? I don't. So that is resolved by gifting 1 to the kohen. You got it? Okay, that's important. Yeah, no, I already did truma. Doesn't matter from where. I already did truma. And now 1 truma falls into chulin. So you have to have 100 to 1 to be mavatal it. You don't have 100 to 1, all of it is asur to a non-kohen. Once you have the ratio, it's batal. Batal means I can have them. Nevertheless, like we said, I give 1 to the kohen. Now, there are other 2 tanoim. It's amazing. We kept on quoting Rabbi Eliezer, which is a big chiddush, guys, because since Rabbi Eliezer is known as Rabbi Eliezer Shamutei, Shamutei either means that he many times follows the sheet of Beis Shammai, as we just had before, just in the previous sugya. And we don't paskin like Beis Shammai, or Rabbi Eliezer Kehasipur was put into a chedem because of his greatness, if we can word it that way. And but the consequence is that normally we don't paskin like him, but everyone quotes, how much do you need to have for bittul and truma? Echad umeya. The other 2 tanoim. Rabbi Yeshua says, B'meya v'oid. Let me tell you what that means. No, you do not need to have 100 against the truma. Yes, I agree that if there's only 99 apples, in it falls truma, it won't be batal. I get that. I'm with you, Rabbi Eliezer. But all you need is to have a v'oid. I'm going to use this word the whole time. If you have 99 and a v'oid, the v'oid is any amount. If you have the most minimum 99 apples and a mashu. By the way, by apples, it's a very bad example, even though I'll stick to my apples. Because whenever there is a mixture of heter and isur, if the heter or the isur is discernible, you take that out of the pile. The little sliver of apple is for sure not truma. So it's a bad example. The example would be that grain. So if I have 99 saw and one saw of truma falls in, everyone holds it. Rabbi Yeshua tells Rabbi Eliezer, you're right, there's no bittul. But it's not that I need to have another saw, 100 saw against the one. I don't need that. Rabbi Yeshua says I have to have 99 and any va'oid. 99.00001 of chulin. In it falls one saw of truma, so it wasn't only 99. It was more than 99. Now it's going to be batul. That's opinion number 2. Rabbi Yossi ben Meshulam says, similar to Rabbi Yeshua, that you don't need 100 against one. 99 against one is not enough. There has to be a va'oid. Rabbi Yeshua doesn't give an amount to the va'oid. Today is a chatzi shir today. Any amount, the most minimum amount. Rabbi Yosef ben Meshulam says the va'oid has to have an amount. How much does the va'oid have to be? It has to be a sixth of the truma. Just focus on the truma. So I'm giving an example, Chavre, where one saw of truma falls into 99 plus. Forget about into what? One saw of truma. A sixth of a saw, which is a kav. Thank you, because a kav has 6 saw. But it's not about the kav. It's about a sixth. Whatever truma fell in, 99 against it is not enough. You don't need 100. What you do need is a sixth of the truma in addition to the 99 times. So it has to be, in the case that I'm giving, it has to be 99 and a sixth saw of chulin, into which falls one saw of truma, bittul. Guys, it's clear. I mean, it's not hard. Just a chap. Maybe I'm not articulate enough. The first opinion is simple. Listen, everyone says 99 to 1 is not enough. So Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, if 99 is not enough, so where do you go from 99? A whole unit. Add a unit, 100. 100 to 1 is good. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, 99 is not enough, but any amount more than 99 is enough. 99 saw of chulin plus, what's the smallest weight? A gram. Plus a mashu, in it falls a saw of truma, bittul. Says Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Meshulam, I like you, Rabbi Yeshua. You don't need to have 100, but the va'oid has to be something. It cannot be a nothing. Cannot be a mashu. What's a something? What makes it chashuv? A sixth of the iser. Let's read it inside. Va'oid have lemeyasa. In other words, why am I saying a kav? He wants to make it clear. It's not the kav, because, guys, every saw has 6 kav. It's not a universal kav. In our example that we're speaking about, one saw of truma that fell in, a kav is a sixth of the isur, in addition to the 99. Which, in other words, the right way of saying it is a sixth. Shtus lemedameya, a sixth of the quantity of that which is creating meduma. What creates meduma, my friends? Not chulin. What created the problem here? The truma. If one saw of truma is what fell in, then the va'oid has to be a shtus of the saw, which is a kav. If what fell in over here is, let's say, is a half a kav, is not a saw, is a kav, then a sixth of a kav. You understand? Guys, we're good, yeah? Pasha, the va'oid means something more substantial than anything. How much? A sixth of that which is creating the dimua. In our example, so I have to have, if I have 99 saw plus a kav of chulin, now if one saw of truma fell in, now it's going to be batal. Says the Gemara. Now we have to begin to give sources to all of them. And of course, when we speak about sources, as we mentioned, midoiraisa truma is batal beroiv. Must be that all of these psukim is what we call an asmachta. Says the Gemara, minayin she'ein oilin. Me'ein oilin means that since normally the rule is bittul beroiv, and even midrabanan elsewhere, generally we find the concept of bittul b'shishim. How do you know that the regular ratio of bittul is not going to be affected by truma? That's the meaning she'ein oilin. Oilin means nullified. I know oilin means aliyah, but in this context means, how do you know that you need to have a higher ratio? Amar Rabbi Yoina, because it says, and we're quoting a pasuk in Parshas Koirach, that what? We're speaking about the separation that the normally that the Levi gives from his Trumas Meiser. Now, guys, we're going to put aside Abba Elazar ben Goimel. Let's go with the normative opinion. Meiser, 10%. Trumas Meiser is 10% from 10%. So let me go back to my apples. Or let me go back to my saw, guys. If I began with 100 saw, how much of it will be Trumas Meiser? How much in 100 saw is the Trumas Meiser? One saw, 10% of 10%. And when the Torah is speaking about the Trumas Meiser, the Torah says, Mikol chelboi es migdashoi mimenu. The pshat of this pasuk is that Hashem wants that when the Levi separates from his Meiser Rishon, the 10%, it should be from the best. And that best becomes holy, because Meiser Rishon is not holy. It's property of the Levi. I'm a Yisrael, I can eat it. But that which he separates, that's going to become Kadosh, should be Mikol Chelboy, from the best. That's the pshat. The drasha that we're making is that instead of reading the word Migdashoy by putting a chidik under the mem and a shva under the kuf, Migdashoy, we're going to read it, we're going to read the vowels Mikachoy, which means that if that which you separated from the Meiser Rishon, which is Meiser min ha-Meiser, which is 10% of 10%, which is 1% from the original. So if you began with 100, whatever that is, so you're going to separate now the best Trumas Meiser. If that falls back in, if the ratio is 99-1, it's Mekadesh in the negative. It sanctifies, which ruins it for the non-Kohen. Davar sha'at medim mimenu, that which you, the Levi, separate from your Meiser, which is 1% from the original, zolst to wissen, she'im yipol otoichai, that if it's going to fall back into the original pile, not migdashoy, mikachoy. Gewaldig. No, the Torah is being marames that when you separate out, if it gets undone, it ruins everything. So for it not to ruin everything, Rabbi Lazar has a simple logic. V'kamahu, what is that? By the way, echad mimea means echad from 100. That means 99-1. A great application of practically how it can happen. Why would there be meduma? There'll be meduma, but even better, because the emes people have a kasha that Trumas Meiser is not really 1% of the original. That's the big kasha. Why not? Because since you give Truma midrabanan, you're giving 2%. So really, Meiser Rishon is 9.8. In other words, it's even less. The answer is that the owner, lachatchila or b'diavad, if he wants, he can be the one separating out the Trumas Meiser. And what he could do is, he can take 3% and say, 2% is for the Truma. And the third is also Trumas Meiser from the next 9 units that I'm going to give to a Levi. In other words, there is a way for Trumas Meiser to be 1%. And if only the Trumas Meiser falls back in, Levi is chayev to do it, and we keep on learning that the owner is allowed to do it either lechatchila for sure b'diavad. Doesn't matter. I'm just giving you an example, Vlad, where the Trumas Meiser will actually be 1%. But it's all an asmachta. The point is that when the Torah is speaking about Trumas Meiser, and we have this way of reading the words, not migdashoy, but mekachoy, that it's mekadosh it, that's echad nemeya. Trumas Meiser, vaguely, is 1 out of 100, which means when you separate 1 from 100, it's 99 chulin, 1 truma. If that falls back in, it's mekadosh it. It means it's not batal. So Rabbi Lazar says, okay, oy bazoi, how much more do you need for it, yes, to be batal? A full unit. He thinks in units. We're speaking about 100, 1 from 100. If that's not enough, it has to be 1 in 101. So Rabbi Eliezer oimer, oy bazoi, now that everyone has the same limud. All of the 3 Tanoim have the same limud. That 99 won't be enough. That is the asmachta. It's not bittul b'roiv. It's not even bittul b'shishim. You're kidding? 99 is a lot more than shishim. That's not good enough. So Rabbi Eliezer says, now that we know what does not work, so what will work? A full unit. Moisif Sa'a Umayla. You have to add a full unit, and then it will be Mala. Mala means elevate. I know elevate means in the opposite direction. Al pi Chasidus, it's exactly the right direction because ironically, something in other words, something that's chulin, that's used in the service of God on a mystical level, creates a greater elevation than truma, because holy is already separated. You're not elevating the tachtoinim. Mala here means that you're making everything permissible to be consumed. So how much do you need for it to be consumed? A full unit. Comes along Rabbi Yeshua, he says, why? The opposite logic. Fakert. If the Torah tells you that 1 in 99 is not enough, 99 is not enough to be ma'ale the 1. And that's the cutoff point. So I'll tell you very simple. So for you, yes, to be ma'ale it, add to the 99. It's similar to the conversation we had about a kazayas. I know we're not talking about a kazayas, but who says you have to add a full unit? Add one, the smallest weight, the smallest measure. Moisif kolshu umayla. That's the easiest to understand. And then Rabbi Yossi ben Hamashulam Oimer, that no, I agree with Rabbi Yeshua. You don't need to add a full unit to create bittul, to do maila. Only 99 and va'oid. But the va'oid has to have a shear. So what will be the shear? He says the shear will be a kav l'meyasa. The kav l'meyasa means in the case that we are giving, which is that you have 99 saw of chulin. If now 1 saw of truma falls in, it won't be, the chulin won't be mylid. Yeah, there has to be more. There has to be more. How much more? At the end, there has to be 100 saw and 1 kav, which would mean that you have 99 and 1 kav of chulin against 1 saw of truma. What's the magic of the kav? Where do we get to the number of kav? It's not always. We want for the added, the va'oid, to be a 1/6 of the unit of the truma. So in our example that we're speaking about 100 saw and 1 saw, we're speaking about units of saw. So truma was of 1 saw. That was the original trumas meiser. So the va'oid, which means shtus limidameya. It's not, the magic is not in the kav. Whatever shear is the truma, at least a 1/6 has to be more than the 99. And Bachlal, where do we find, just to know in halacha, where do we find elsewhere the significance of a shtus? This we all know from oina'a, me'ingen, that when it comes to making financial transactions, that there are many items that have a market value. And if a person overcharges, not in the capitalistic society, that everyone knows they're being overcharged. Everyone knows that that's the way it works. People are making the most profit that they can make, but there are certain, by Torah law, is when it comes to staple items, there is a roof of how much profit you are allowed to make. And if a person is going to overcharge, right, unless they tell the consumer, this is worth $1. I'm selling it for $100. If he tells him that it's oich good. But if the guy was not told that, then these are the rules, that only if the overcharge or the undercharge, if it's less than a 1/6, then whichever side got the raw end of the stick, they are moichel. The moment it hits a 1/6, by a 1/6, if it's more than a 1/6, then the halacha is that the other side can make a bittul hamekach. But there's a certain magic about the 6. I'm just giving you where else we find it. So he says the same thing over here. A 6, it has to be a davar chashuv. Same conversation today about the chatzi shir versus Rabbi Yeshua that says, no, any amount. And the Gemara says, this is also important, I know it's late. The halacha kidvarav, the Gemara says the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi and Amshulam. I just want people to know that even though the Gemara says halacha kidvarav, we don't paskin like the Gemara's halacha. B'chlal, that's a big rule to have. Actually, we paskin, the Rambam paskins that Rabbi Eliezer, which is Echad Omeya, beyond Rabbi Yeshua, 100 against